The sun, a fiery disk, blazed above the endless plains, mercilessly scorching everything. Dust, a ghostly veil, rose behind the wagon wheels, enveloping everything like a shroud. Clinging to the weathered handle, Emma felt every joint ache with the bone-rattling jolts. She had arrived in the Wild West, driven by hope for a new life, fleeing a past she wanted to escape to the ends of the earth. The wind whistled through the cracks of the wagon, whispering of longing and solitude. Never before had she seen anything like it. An endless, bottomless sky, scorching heat, and a silence that pressed upon her ears like a stone slab. The vastness, once a symbol of freedom, now seemed like a deadly trap. Her delicate hands, unaccustomed to hard labor, were already covered in calluses, and her shoulders ached from the heavy burden. Emma came to a small town called Snake Creek, which, like most settlements in the Wild West, was a refuge for the desperate and the fugitives. She dreamed of her own home, a quiet, peaceful life, and forgetting forever what she had left behind. Her dreams seemed so distant, yet deep down she believed she could achieve them, no matter what. But fate appeared determined to deny her. In Snake Creek, everything remained as unwelcoming as before, just as it had been on the road. The wooden houses looked as though they might collapse at any moment under the gusts of wind, ready to splinter into pieces. The dusty streets, where smiles were a rare sight, held the mark of general weariness. People eyed each other warily, like predators, suspiciously looking for hidden threats in everyone. Emma found work at the local saloon where darkness and stench reigned. She had to clean, wash the floors, and serve the patrons. A job exhausting to the extreme, but she seized any chance to earn a living. The atmosphere inside the saloon was saturated with the acrid smoke of cheap cigarettes, the smell of alcohol, and the sense of mounting tension. Men whose faces bore the marks of fatigue and cruelty spent their evenings there, engrossed in card games, sipping whiskey and sharing gossip. One evening, as Emma wiped down the tables, a man entered the saloon. He was tall and lean, clad in a worn leather jacket and a hat that shadowed his face. He moved past her without a glance, yet Emma felt his gaze upon her. Something about his silent confidence, his bearing, was unsettling. The man settled in a far corner, ordered whiskey, and seemed entirely oblivious to the activity around him. His gaze was fixed on the window, beyond which lay impenetrable darkness. Emma tried not to look at him, but she couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching her. Soon, a poker game began. Noise, laughter, and foul language blended into a deafening cacophony, shattering the late evening's quiet. Emma continued her work, trying not to draw any extra attention to herself. But her fate, it seemed, was already sealed. Suddenly, a piercing scream echoed through the stuffy saloon. Someone's voice, laced with fury, accused another player of cheating. The tension, thick in the air, instantly escalated, and the verbal argument devolved into a crude brawl. Grabbing at each other in a furious fight, the men rolled across the floor, smashing tables and overturning chairs. One of the combatants, his face contorted with rage, unexpectedly drew a weathered revolver from its holster. Emma's fingers, watching from her table, instantly went numb. She instinctively recoiled, sensing mortal danger, and at that very moment, a deafening shot rang out. Everyone froze as if turned to stone. Smoke from the gunshot, thick and acrid, filled the room, making people cough and rub their eyes. On the floor near the poker table lay a dead man, posed unnaturally. A deathly silence fell, broken only by the heavy breaths of those who witnessed the tragedy. A sense of impending doom, fear, and despair hung in the air. The stranger, seated in the dark corner, slowly rose, as if awakening from a long slumber. His face remained hidden beneath the wide brim of his hat, but Emma felt his gaze, like a burning ember, piercing through her. Without uttering a word, he moved toward the exit, his figure a shadow slipping into the night. The next day, a rumor spread throughout the town. A well-known bandit had been murdered. The criminal's death caused a serious uproar. The sheriff began an investigation, but the evidence seemed to vanish, and the few witnesses were intimidated. Then Emma realized she was an unwilling witness to a terrible crime, and now deadly danger loomed over her. And there he was again, the stranger she had seen in the saloon. He materialized as suddenly as before, a phantom conjured from a nightmare. Emma was clearing the tables when he approached, his footsteps silent on the dusty floor. He leaned in, his gravelly, barely audible voice whispering right beside her ear. "You need help," he rasped, "and you must trust me." His name was Cain. He didn't elaborate on his past, only hinting that his life had been intertwined with a criminal underworld he desperately wanted to escape. Emma hesitated, but the chilling fear for her own safety overcame all doubts. She desperately needed protection, and Cain seemed to be her only chance. They agreed to meet the following day. Emma, torn between fear and a faint glimmer of hope, waited for him by the river, outside the city, far from prying eyes. Cain arrived for the meeting on horseback, his face once more hidden in the shadows cast by the brim of his hat. "Get out of Snake Creek," he stated flatly, his voice ringing with the harshness of steel. "And the sooner, the better. You don't belong here, Emma." Her face paled, her eyes widening in alarm. "But what about work? How will I earn a living?" she whispered, her voice trembling. He stepped towards her, his face etched with unwavering resolve. "It doesn't matter. Only your safety is important now. These surroundings have become too dangerous. Your knowledge, as well as my presence, attracts unwanted attention, which could lead to trouble." He pulled a worn wallet stuffed with money from his pocket and offered it to Emma. "This is for your initial needs. I will help you leave here." Emma gazed at him, her skepticism evident. Her eyes held a question. What did he want? Why was he helping her? Yet she had no choice. She understood she couldn't manage alone. Together, they left Snake Creek, forever abandoning the place. Cain, it turned out, knew these lands intimately, as if they were his own home. He could survive in the harshest conditions, navigating by the stars, finding water in seemingly waterless places, and knowing where to shelter from the elements and wild animals. He taught her to handle a weapon, showed her how to build a fire in mere minutes, and how to find food in those wild regions. The training was long and difficult, but Emma tried her best. She wanted to survive. During their journey, Emma got to know Cain better, discovering something new about him each day, but she still didn't understand what had brought him to her or what he planned. He was a man with a deep wound in his soul, carrying a heavy burden of guilt, a weight he bore as if it were an impossible load. Behind his stern expression, behind the mask of indifference, Emma perceived a sensitive, vulnerable heart. In his eyes, she saw loneliness, a desperate struggle with inner demons, a shadow of despair. They supported each other in silence, as if bound by an invisible thread. Emma felt her fear gradually recede, giving way to confidence as she grew stronger and braver. And in her heart, a feeling began to blossom, one she couldn't fully comprehend herself. One day, during another journey, they stumbled upon a den of bandits who had taken shelter in an abandoned ranch. Cain, without hesitation, decided to deal with them. Emma tried to dissuade him, reminding him of the danger, but he was unyielding. His determination, his resolve at that moment spoke volumes. "You must leave," he stated harshly, steel evident in his voice. "It's too dangerous for you." "I won't leave," Emma replied firmly, her voice trembling, but determination shone in her eyes. "I'm staying with you, Cain." And she stayed, clutching his thin hand, which shook with tension. The night enveloped the ranch in a thick, impenetrable darkness. Emma watched as Cain, like a phantom, slipped into the night, creeping towards the ranch. He moved silently, like a wild beast ready to strike. She saw him deal with the bandits. His movements were honed to perfection, swift and deadly. She witnessed his brutality, his ruthlessness, but she also saw his strange, twisted sense of justice, his unquenchable desire to protect those who were weaker and more defenseless. After the brutal fight with the bandits, Cain was wounded. Blood bloomed crimson on his clothes, spreading like a dark stain. Emma, forgetting her fear, rushed to him. She administered first aid, carefully bandaging his wound, trying not to cause him any additional pain. She stayed by his side the entire night, not closing her eyes, caring for him, feeling a new emotion blossom within her. That night, she felt truly needed for the first time, experiencing a deep, sharp attachment to this man, who was both a danger and a salvation to her. Soon news reached them. A hunt was declared for Cain. A generous reward was offered for his head. Cain, it turned out, was known as one of the most dangerous criminals in the entire Wild West. Emma, struck by this revealed truth, realized Cain had carefully concealed his past. Now she understood everything. They were forced to flee to save their lives. Ruthless bounty hunters, willing to commit any act of treachery for the promised reward, were hot on their heels. Cain changed before her very eyes. He became even more withdrawn, his face hardening into an impenetrable mask. Desperately, he tried to push Emma away, begging her to leave, to protect herself from the looming danger. "Leave," he said, his voice a low growl, looking directly into her eyes. "You don't belong with me. You shouldn't suffer because of me. I am cursed. I bring only suffering." But Emma refused to back down. She stayed with him because she realized she loved him. She loved the strong and vulnerable man, both cruel and just. They hid in the mountains, sheltering from the weather in caves, content with whatever they could find. Their relationship became deeper than ever before. They silently shared both hardships and joys, supporting each other through difficult times. One day, when they stopped for the night, Cain spoke about his past. He told her how he was once part of a gang that robbed banks and trains. He was brutal, his actions showing no mercy. He had many terrible deeds behind him, which made the blood run cold. And yet he had a strange, contradictory trait. He always sought to protect those who were weaker, more defenseless. He was a man torn apart, forever oscillating between the abyss of darkness and fleeting glimpses of light. Emma listened to his confession, not uttering a single word of judgment. She understood that the past was timeless, something that couldn't be rewritten or altered. But she believed it could be atoned for, prayed away. She saw Cain, with his last ounce of strength, trying to break free from the chains of his past, desperately striving to become better, purer. "I love you," she whispered softly, her voice trembling with emotion. Cain remained silent for a long, unbearable time. He looked directly into her eyes, and in the depths of his gaze, immense pain swirled, but alongside it, a timid hope. "You shouldn't," he whispered, his voice cracking into a rasp. "You shouldn't love someone like me." But Emma, unflinching, repeated her words, piercing straight to his wounded heart. She told him he deserved love, that he deserved happiness. And then Cain, broken and weary of the eternal fight, surrendered. He embraced her, held her close, feeling the warmth of her body seep into him, banishing the cold of loneliness. For the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to feel joy, a timid hope that seemed on the verge of bursting into a bright flame. Their pursuit continued, relentless and unavoidable. Days passed, and with them came anxiety. The bounty hunters relentlessly drew closer, like predatory beasts sensing their prey. Cain understood. There wasn't much time left. Sooner or later, they would have to confront them, and then their fate would be decided. He didn't want to endanger Emma. His heart clenched at the thought. But abandoning her, leaving her to her fate, was impossible. They made a difficult decision to separate. Cain would distract their pursuers, lead them away, while Emma would flee, escape, run for her life while there was the slightest chance. This was their only opportunity to survive this deadly game. "I love you," whispered Emma, as they stood facing each other, preparing for the worst, their separation. Tears glistened in her eyes, reflecting the last rays of the setting sun. "I love you too," Cain replied, his voice wavering, but determination shining in his eyes. "Don't be afraid. I will find you no matter the cost." They exchanged a final look, filled with both hope and fear, and then they parted. Emma lurched forward, not glancing back, and ran as though the ground didn't exist beneath her feet. A roaring filled her ears, and then the sounds of gunfire pierced the silence, accompanied by wild screams that foretold danger. She had no idea what was happening, but one thing was clear. Survival was paramount. She spent several long days fleeing, escaping from an unknown threat. She had to hide and scavenge for food wherever she could find it. Thoughts of Cain never left her mind. She clung to the hope, the belief that he was alive, that he would find her, no matter what. Finally, she reached a small town, lost amongst the hills. She managed to find work in a modest cafe, where she hoped to find some respite from the nightmares that haunted her. She desperately tried to start a new life, but her heart was torn by longing for Cain, by the agonizing weight. Several months had passed. Emma had almost resigned herself to the idea that she would never see Cain again, that their paths had diverged for good. But one day, As Emma was dusting the table in the small cafe, the door creaked open and a man appeared in the doorway. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a worn leather jacket and a hat, the deep shadow of which hid his face. Emma froze, her breath catching in her throat. Her heart pounded in her chest like a trapped animal. She recognized him immediately, Cain. He approached her, his gaze seeming to pierce right through her. In the depths of his eyes, Emma saw what she had been searching for all her life. Love. He whispered softly, "I found you." Unable to contain her emotions, Emma rushed towards him, and they embraced tightly. She felt the warmth of his arms around her, inhaling the scent of old leather and a faint trace of tobacco. In that instant, she understood their life together would not be simple. Ghosts of the past would haunt them, and they would face many trials. But now they were together, and hope flickered within their hearts. Clinging to each other, they left the small town, leaving behind everything that connected them to the past. They walked away, the two of them, towards a beckoning unknown, believing in their strength and in their ability to build a new life, to find long-awaited happiness. A year passed. One warm evening, as the sun dipped towards the horizon, painting the sky in golden hues, Cain and Emma sat by a fire. They settled in a secluded spot, away from prying eyes, surrounded by silence and tranquility. Nearby, 3 horses grazed peacefully, their silhouettes outlined against the sunset. Cain picked up a crackling log and tossed it into the fire. The flames blazed brighter, illuminating their faces. "Do you remember Snake Creek?" Emma asked softly, her voice laced with a hint of pain. Cain nodded, his gaze seeming to drift into the depths of memory. He could never forget that small town, lost amongst the hills, and the events that had turned their lives upside down in an instant. "Sometimes it feels like it was all just a dream," Emma whispered, her fingers nervously tracing the folds of her dress. "But it truly happened," Cain said firmly, his voice quiet yet resolute. He gently took her hand, intertwining their fingers. "All of it was real," he repeated, squeezing her palm. "And it was necessary." He gazed into her eyes, and within those bottomless pools reflected not only love, but also boundless gratitude and a quiet, almost reverent appreciation for having weathered it all together. Emma smiled, and in that smile, determination shone. She knew what a long and arduous journey lay ahead, but they would manage because they were together, hand in hand, shoulder to shoulder. At that moment, somewhere in the distance, the distinct sound of hooves echoed, growing louder with each second. Cain, like a wild beast, became alert, his senses heightened. He rose to his feet with a jerk, adjusting his battered hat and pulling it low over his face, shielding his eyes from prying glances. Without hesitation, Emma stood beside him, sensing his tension. She felt Cain's muscles tense as he prepared for the unknown. Riders were relentlessly closing in on them, and a sense of foreboding hung in the air. Cain steeled himself. His gaze became hard and focused. He suddenly realized the past still held him in its claws. "Hide," he breathed, addressing Emma. "Quickly!" Instinctively, Emma darted behind the mighty trunk of an ancient oak tree. She distinctly heard Cain go out to meet the riders, whose horses were pounding the ground. Fragments of their rough voices reached her, their words lost in the wind's noise. Then suddenly there was silence, ominous and oppressive. Several long minutes passed before Cain returned. His face was unreadable. "Everything is fine," he said in a muffled voice. Emma cautiously emerged from her hiding place, her heart still racing. She looked up at Cain, peering into his eyes, trying to understand what had happened. His face seemed frozen in calmness. A mask of serenity concealed the storm raging within. "Who was it?" she asked quietly, her voice trembling with an undefined fear. Cain exhaled slowly, as if shedding a heavy burden. "People from the past," he replied. "They came for me, wanted to take me back, but I told them I'm a completely different person now." Emma took several hesitant steps towards him. She reached out, embracing him. Tenderness, worry, and relief were evident in her touch. "You've changed," she whispered, gazing into his eyes, as if trying to find the answers to her agonizing questions. "Yes," Cain confirmed, his voice sounding hollow, like an echo of his former life. "I have changed. Because of you." They stood, embraced, watching the setting sun paint the sky in crimson and golden hues. The wind playfully tousled their hair, caressing their skin. They were together, hand in hand, and in that moment seemed to have found eternal happiness. Yet, deep down, Emma knew that the shadows of the past would not vanish without a trace. She knew that Cain faced an eternal battle with his inner demons, that they had many trials ahead. But now, she was ready, prepared to share all hardships with him, ready to support him every step of the way, no matter how many were required. Because she loved Cain with all her soul and believed in their shared future, regardless of everything. Their life was an endless series of dangers. They had to hide from pursuers, run, evade pursuit, and fight for every single day lived. But they were together, hand in hand, and that was the most important, the most precious thing they had left. One day, during another wandering, they stumbled upon an abandoned mine, overgrown with weeds and draped in cobwebs. Cain immediately realized it could be a good hiding place, a safe haven from enemies. They began to set up a small dwelling there. It turned out to be modest, but secure, offering a feeling of peace that they had lacked so much. Emma spent her days bustling around the household, tending the hearth, while Cain went hunting and fishing, providing them with food. In the evenings, sitting by the fire, they had leisurely conversations, laughed heartily, forgetting about everything in the world. In those moments, they were truly happy, as if the universe itself was bestowing its favor upon them. But one day, when Cain went hunting, strangers burst into the mine where they had found shelter. They were possessed by one single goal: to find Cain. They knew he was nearby. Sensing something was amiss, Emma hurried to hide. Harsh voices, distant noises, both unsettling and frightening, reached her ears. She felt with every fiber of her being the mortal danger hanging over them. The strangers, unwilling to accept failure, found her hiding place. Roughly, they bound Emma, their malicious faces twisted into sneers as they began to taunt her, despising her pleas for mercy. They had set a trap, hoping to lure Cain out. But Cain returned. He saw the consequences of their actions, and a rage, like a raging fire, ignited in his eyes. Without hesitation, he plunged into the fight with the strangers, unleashing all his fury upon them. He was ferocious, like a wild beast defending its domain. His movements were swift and precise, each blow deadly. He was protecting Emma, ready to give his life for her. When the battle was over, the strangers lay dead. Cain was wounded. Gashes marred his body, yet he stood leaning on his sword. Emma rushed to him, her eyes filled with worry. She began tending to his wounds, bandaging them, trying to staunch the blood. "Are you all right?" Emma asked anxiously, searching his face. "Yes," Cain replied, striving to keep his voice steady. "Everything's fine. It's just, I'm tired of running, of secrecy, and of fear." Emma stepped toward him, placing her hand on his shoulder. Her eyes, the color of the spring sky, showed concern. "What do you want to do?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. Cain took a deep breath, feeling a resolve building within him. "I want to stay with you," he replied, looking directly into her eyes. "I want to live a normal, ordinary life, a life without danger or pursuit, a life filled only with love, peace, and confidence in the future." They decided to begin anew. Leaving the dark depths of the mine behind, they set off in search of a new home, where no one knew their past, where they could hide from the shadows of what had been. Eventually, they found a secluded spot where they built their new home. They started a farm, working from dawn until dusk, immersed in peaceful chores. They loved each other, living each day a simple yet precious life. Happiness settled in their hearts. But sometimes, when the night's darkness enveloped the earth, Emma would wake from nightmares. She was haunted by terrible dreams, gunshots, chases, and chilling fear. She tossed and turned in bed, drenched in cold sweat, gripped by the terror that their past would catch up to them. But Cain was always there, his strong arms embracing her, offering peace and assurance. He whispered gentle words, soothing her and assuring her they were safe, that nothing could destroy their new world. He calmed her, holding her close, whispering words of comfort, promising that everything would be all right. One day, wandering through a dense forest, they stumbled upon a tiny puppy. They decided to name him Buck. This puppy became their loyal friend, their devoted companion, sharing every day with them. Many years later, when their hair was touched by gray, They sat on the old porch of their home, watching the sun slowly sink below the horizon. They reminisced about the life they had lived, full of ups and downs. They had endured considerable trials through suffering and the bitterness of loss. But despite everything, they found each other, and this mutual bond became their support in everything. And they stayed together. "Do you have any regrets?" Emma asked quietly, her voice trembling with emotion. Cain gently took her hand, interlacing their fingers. His gaze was full of love and determination. "None," he replied firmly, squeezing her palm in his. They were silent, sitting on the edge of the cliff, watching the huge sun slowly sink into the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange, pink, and violet. The wind gently tousled their hair. They knew their life together would be full of difficulties and trials, that a struggle awaited them, but now they were together, and this gave them strength. They were happy, and endlessly happy, gazing into each other's eyes, feeling their hearts beat in unison. Suddenly, their peace was broken by the loud barking of Buck, their loyal dog. Cain felt chills run down his spine. The sound of hooves came from the forest. A rider was approaching. Cain tensed, his muscles cramping. He recognized him. His heart pounded wildly in his chest. "What's happening?" Emma asked anxiously, noticing the change in his face. It's the past," Cain breathed, struggling to find the words. "It's returned." The rider, a menacing shadow from the past, drew near. He wore the uniform of a sheriff, a sight that sent a chill down Cain's spine. His back was slick with sweat. Just the sight of the man, his impenetrable face, sparked a fear mixed with dread. Cain felt the past, like a nightmare made real, closing in around him. "Cain?" the sheriff announced, his voice firm. "You are under arrest." Cain slowly rose. His gaze flickered towards Emma, and pain was evident in his eyes. "I have to go," he managed, each word seemingly a struggle. "No," Emma retorted firmly, her voice trembling with emotion. "I won't allow it." She made a sharp gesture, and the revolver gleamed in the lamplight. "You shall not pass." Without a moment's hesitation, Cain stepped forward and seized her arm, attempting to wrest the weapon away. "No, Emma, this is my cross, and I must bear it. I have to atone for my sins." He gently touched his lips to hers. "I love you," he whispered, "and I always will." The sheriff, a tall man with weary eyes, snapped the handcuffs shut. Cain glanced at Emma, searching her eyes for a flicker of hope. Then he smiled, though the smile was crooked and sad. "Don't be sad," he whispered, trying to keep his voice strong. "We'll meet again, surely." The sheriff led Cain away, his footsteps echoing in the deserted space. Emma stood, unable to look away from the receding figures. Tears streamed down her cheeks, leaving wet trails. She was left utterly alone, in a silence that deafened with its emptiness. In that moment, she realized she had lost Cain forever. A bitter understanding clenched her heart, but despite the pain, she knew he would remain forever in her memory, in the most secret corners of her soul. He had been her love, her life, her purpose. Now she was alone, but this solitude gifted her freedom. Freedom from shackles, from prejudice, from fear. She felt within herself an unknown strength, capable of withstanding any trial. She was strong. She felt immense gratitude for such all-consuming love. Emma lived a long, full life, but she never forgot Cain. The memory of him lived on in her heart, not fading with the years. She often came to that very place where fate had brought them together. Standing there, she relived the years they had spent together, over and over in her memory, the tender feelings etched into every moment. Emma departed this world in her old age. They buried her near the place where they had once found each other. On the modest headstone, carved from stone, were engraved simple yet profound words. She loved Cain and was loved. And on the vast expanse of the Wild West, where harsh customs reigned and cruelty raged, silence and the wind took over. Only the stars, the silent guardians of the night, held the memory of a love that had overcome all obstacles. A love that was undaunted by trials and tribulations, dangers and sins. A love that managed to conquer even death itself.